I'm Simon Jones, and I'm very happy to be chairing this panel this morning with some very talented speakers. We were just caught up in a discussion about the fascinating wearable technology in the enterprise. So before we go into this, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me, who I am, what I do. I'm a professional communicator. So in the day I work in PR, I work in corporate communications in enterprise. I spent more than 20 years behind the curtain helping people with positioning statements, competitive advantage, unfair advantage maybe, storytelling and messaging, and coaching people to stand up here on stage and talk to you. It's not easy when you get up here, of course. Now it's my turn to come out of the shadows and into the spotlight. And about 6 months ago, I started writing a little blog as a hobby. It all started about a year ago when I got a jawbone up and was immediately in love. As soon as I found out about the second generation, I got the mail saying it's now available. I got my credit card out there and then and ordered one. 3 months later, 3 jawbone ups later, I was a little bit disillusioned and decided to send it back finally and write about my experiences with the jawbone. And this turned into a blog. It's called Wearable Tech Watch. It's on WordPress, and it seems to have really taken off. I'm getting hundreds and hundreds of people reading it per day, which is kind of scary. So I started off focusing on wristbands, and now I'm kind of expanding into wanting to write about things like smartwatches, possibly about things like glass, but possibly not. And also really interested in crowdfunding. So I've been prepared to reach into my pocket or my credit card and give a little bit of support here and there for projects on Indiegogo. In fact, I just got a refund a couple of days ago from one that didn't fly, but I'm prepared to put that money back into the system. So wearable technology is for me absolutely fascinating. It's where my work and my hobby converge. And I'm going to now introduce you to our panelists this morning. So from right on the stage to left, we have Cary Bran, who is from Plantronics. And anybody who's ever thought about wearable technology for the ear will have probably worn or known of a Plantronics headset. So just when you thought the headset was dead, right? Then next, in the middle, we have Chris Todd from a company called Theatro. He tells me that he's just come out of stealth mode today. So congratulations for that. First press release is out there. Theatro simplifies in-store operations, and he's talking about focusing on, I'll ask you, which one are you? Are you the white-collar enterprise worker, or are you the blue-collar enterprise worker? There's more to enterprise than guys in suits working in towers. So we're going to be focusing on that when we're talking to Chris. We also have Ed English from APX Labs. So he's building software for smart glasses, like Google Glass, and that's going to enable some immersive digital experiences to be projected over the physical world for improving business in deskless scenarios. So again, the picker, the person on the oil rig, when they can't reach into their pocket and, I'll turn it off, and pick up their mobile phone because it's dangerous or whatever. So I'll ask each of the speakers to introduce themselves, and then there's a few questions I've got prepared here, but if you think you've got a better one, you're very welcome to put your hand up and ask it. We're not giving prizes for the questions. We're just going to take them because you're really good. So over to you, Cary.
Oh, all right. So I guess I'll go first. Good morning or afternoon. How many of you folks have heard of Plantronics? Wow, I'm amazed every time. Okay, so I was going to give you a brief history lesson about Plantronics real quickly and then move on to kind of what I've been up to at PLT Labs, which is the innovation engine inside of Plantronics. So Plantronics was started about 52 years ago by 2 airplane pilots that had a problem. They had a wearable device that they had to wear all the time, and it was rather clunky, and it was very heavy, and it was very fatiguing. they got together in their garage and they designed the first lightweight headsets for aircraft. So we've seen a transition. We've been around for quite some time watching wearable technology, especially around the head, and how it's evolved and actually has improved over the years. So moving from airplanes to where we are today, a few years back we started to introduce sensor technology into our headset devices. So products you can buy on the shelf today have capacitive sensing capabilities. So the devices know if they're being worn or not. So for example, if I put it on my ear, we can send events to the phone, to your PC, that the device is being worn. We've also escalated those events through an SDK, so it allows developers from the enterprise to actually integrate in our headsets into line of business applications, into unified communication systems. So my role at Plantronics? My role at Plantronics is actually to build the next generation of wearable concept devices through advanced hardware and software prototyping. So I got the funnest job at Plantronics. I actually get to build the future. So that's me, and passing it along.
Okay, so let's hear from Chris.
All right. Good day, everybody. As Simon mentioned, I'm from Theatro, and we did just put out a press release today to introduce the company, so it's kind of new. 2 years in the making. We started out, I'm the president CEO of the company and the founder of one of the founders of the company, and we started out 2+ years ago to build applications for the enterprise for the retail marketplace for big box retailers, and did quite well. We started working with one particular customer, but one of the things that we quickly realized was the fact that our application on a handheld device was not appropriate for a lot of the people that work in retail because they can't have something in their hand. And as Simon and I were just chatting about, that's the ultimate definition of a wearable. Is it has to be not in your hand, it should be on your body. It doesn't matter where it is. And so it was our customer that actually pushed us into wearables. We started as an app company, and now we're into hardware and building the devices that we supply to our customers. And it's been actually a really exciting endeavor because as having been in the app business for a long time, you'll tend to view iOS and Android devices as being, platforms that are easy to develop on, and they're nice, and they do a lot of things for you. But once you jump into the wearable side where we were, and we built our own device, we quickly realized that actually, from our perspective, the handheld devices that are out there, whether it's iOS or Android, are the great limiters on what you can do, because you can't control the battery, you can't control the processor, you can't control the audio, you can't control, just most of those things are not available. So as an app company, now all of a sudden, creating our own wearable just really opened up the endless possibilities of what we can do. And so we're very excited today to launch our company, and in our announcement, we announced that like I said, we're in retail. We're rolling out our solution that I'll be talking about later in the demo nationwide to the Container Store. So it's our first customer, so really excited about that, and talk more about it.
Okay, so thank you. And when it comes to deskless, Ed, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes, thanks. So I'll tell you a little bit of the history of APX Labs. It doesn't go back as far as Plantronics, but it started in 2010, and we built a solution which we euphemistically call Terminator Vision for the military. And what this solution was using smart glasses, which had binocular, transparent kind of displays with a whole bunch of sensors and things on them. But what it was designed to do was to allow soldiers to get information in their vision while keeping hands-free. And in addition, we use the onboard camera of the devices to scan crowds, pick out faces, do a biometric match, and basically say, good guy or bad guy. And that was the very first solution that we built, which was Terminator Vision, and it was a great success. From that, our customer asked us to build another solution for combat medics. The same kind of device was used, but in this case for a scenario where a combat medic was dealing with a triage patient, getting information right in their point of view about the patient, whether they were allergic to morphine, for example, and streaming the video from what they actually see back to a remote doctor who could say, don't monkey with that. That's his spleen or whatever it was. So those two things were really the catalysts for our company. And from that time, a couple of things happened, which were really interesting. First is Google Glass came out, which was awesome, because it really defined and kind of created the notion of a category of smart glasses. Even though there are other types and other manufacturers making different kind of versions of these smart glasses. And then secondly, it became obvious to us that the range of scenarios where delivering hands-free, real-time, in-context, and particularly overlay information at the point of work was tremendously valuable. So we took it upon ourselves to create a platform that could power these kinds of scenarios. And as Simon mentioned, we really think the biggest, best, and strongest case for them is broadly in the category of people we call deskless workers, which is mostly not us, right? If you're in your office, you have a screen in front of you. You're typing on them now, half of you. The other half have a phone that you're probably looking at as well. But if you're doing things that you need hands-free, real-time, in-context data, what else do you have? Well, you don't have another kind of device. You don't have other vehicles to get that data and application access to the workers. So we focused on building a solution that could serve the needs of doctors, nurses, oil rig workers, utility linemen, people in warehouses, people on manufacturing lines, which is a lot of people. It's about 1 in 5 adults in the world. So that's what APEX does. We build software for smart glasses.
Thank you. So in contrast to consumer wearables, where the wrist seems to have become the dominant platform, we've got representatives here. Cary's the ear man, Chris is the belt man, and Ed is the glass man. So, gentlemen, which one is going to prevail in the enterprise?
All of them. Yeah. All of them.
Okay,
that's a good answer, but convince me. So maybe do you want to state the case for ear?
I think, okay, yeah, I'll state the case for ear. So I think, let me think here. Yes, so with any type of wearable solution, especially if we're doing anything like that augments reality or has a heads-up display, you're going to require, I would say, a better than average audio experience to go along with that wearable device. So I think the ear is very important in conveying and communicating between people and systems. So there is something to be said for having a premium audio experience here, or more discreetly, wherever you want to put it, but somewhere up on your head by your ears. The other piece of that, I think that is absolutely important as well, is that building a device that actually sits on your head has to be fairly comfortable, something you can wear all day long. And I would conjecture on your ear, it needs to be a little bit discreet as well. So it's not, I'm not looking at you with it, depending on the environment. If I'm out on an oil rig, maybe it's a different story. But if I'm in the office, having something that's small, discreet, that helps me do my job, absolutely.
Okay, so I'll be asking you at the end of this, a show of hands on who you think is going to be the most convincing here. So, Chris, you've got some belt-worn stuff and some tags as well. Do you want to show us some tags? So, again, belt. What's the case for this?
Well, I mean, it's actually belt, but it's also just worn on your body. So wherever you want to put it on the body, and the belt, the pocket,
I was just figuring
whatever, and so forth. Yeah, I'll be the belt guy for this. But I would also echo what Cary had said. Wearables, by nature, at least the definition that we have, is it should either be voice controlled or gesture controlled. If you have to take something out, hold it in your hand to manipulate it and so forth, candidly, that's a handheld, not a wearable. And so most of the wearables out there are either using voice or gesture, even the glasses and so forth, they command it that way. You're not going to start getting up and monkeying with your various stuff. And so I think, fundamentally, there's a lot of different places on the body that are going to be applicable. It just depends on the particular use case, because, as we talked about it being for the, as you mentioned, blue collar or the non-professional, right? The non-professional that tends to have their hands free. Well, the wearable typically, in our opinion, is going to be tailored specifically to the job function that they need to do, and therefore it might be on the ear, it might be on the belt, it might be on your fingertip, it might be on your head. It just depends on what the application is.
Okay, thank you. And regarding glass, it's been quite an emotive subject. We've heard about people being cited for speeding violations or whatever when they're wearing glass. Or we've heard of coffee shops where you can't wear it. So Ed, what's going to get glass over the hump?
Well, there's two different branches of the smart glasses tree, I'll say. One would be a monocular heads-up display like glass. And there are others which I'd put in the category of binocular transparent lenses, actual glasses. And both of those are great devices that are suitable for different kinds of scenarios. So I think that you'll find that the adoption and the value of these two different categories of smart glasses are going to be quite different. The thing that I always kind of think about first is, when we're looking at enterprise scenarios, the thing that gives the enterprise a little bit of a different kind of variable than consumers is your job may require it. Your boss may tell you to wear it. So there may not be an option if it's part of your uniform, part of your kit, part of your job, and it may become necessary. So we'll find that these kinds of devices are just issued as part of the equipment for you to do the work that you need to do.
So you get your hard hat, and you get your glasses, you get your tag.
Exactly. Yeah, when you walk into the warehouse, you pick up your hard hat, you pick up your glasses or your other devices, and that's just part of what you use for your job. And when you're done, you put them back in the bin, perhaps.
Okay, so let's just put it out to the audience out there. Quick show of hands. If you think that ear is going to be the dominant wearable technology in blue collar, let's put your hand up now, please. At least someone's listening, thank you. Okay. So 2 or 3. How about belt or anywhere on the body? Not much, quite a few. Okay. And glass? Yeah, okay, so that's a clear winner. And how about all 3? I know it's cheating, but got to get you guys to interact. Okay, so in that case, how is hands-free? Can you give me some examples of how you think hands-free is going to really transform the blue-collar enterprise? Sticking with guys who don't have computers, who can't put their hand in the pocket and pull out the smartphone or ladies because they're doing something that requires hand and eye concentration.
Sure, I'll take that to start. There's a couple of things that we've found from our customers that are extraordinarily valuable, and probably the most would be being able to get access to expert help. We call that see what I see. The glasses have a camera. The camera can stream video of what the work is going on at that moment back to anybody else. So you can get expert help to do the task that before you were fumbling around with. It may be dangerous. You may not know what to do. You may be inefficient. So you can get real-time expert help just by using the camera on the device. And the information back on how to solve it comes back through the display. So that's one way that you find that these devices make your job better, faster, cheaper, and safer. And the other is the information that is available to you with glasses is real time. And by that, I mean it shows up in your view immediately. So it's not in your phone in your pocket. It's not on a PC that's back at a kiosk somewhere in the warehouse, or it's not printed out on a piece of paper before your job starts. But the information you need, your tasks, messages, alerts, all of that shows up right when you need it, right in context. And that's unique, that these categories of devices that are enabling. So it makes your job better, faster, cheaper, safer.
So Chris, I know you'd say retail, so I'm going to ask you in a second. But Cary, can you tell me some verticals that you think are really going to fly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think verticals that require a certain level of human efficiencies that you can't, I guess taking the element of boredom out of your job by enforcing it upon you. I'll give you an example. Pick system would be a good example for wearable technology where it's monotonous work, but somebody has to do it all day long. If you had a heads-up display that had a camera on it that was taking pictures of maybe a QR code from a bin, and at the same time there's an audio element to that says, please confirm what you're looking at, because maybe the camera is taking a picture of it, but it doesn't really know what the worker's looking at. You could say the confirmation code and then actually have increased efficiencies in picking, which is kind of a monotonous job. Not a lot of people like to do it, but people do it.
But can I interrupt you there with a question?
Yeah.
To say, why use a human? I mean, unless you're going back to the Matrix and using the human as the fuel cell for the bot, what's the benefit of using a person in this area?
Economic growth. No, I think having people do the work, there's something about having the hands-onness, and I can't defend if you could fully automate a system. that would be ideal. But there's something about the human element that it just kind of creeps me out just a little bit to say.
But you can also do that today, right? We have existing warehouses and people and processes and systems, and extending all of that with these new devices is achievable today. A fully futuristic robotic world, we'll have a conference on that, in 2115. But it's the interim step. So we aren't all necessarily going to be robots, but we'll behave like robots, and it'll be cheaper, and we can do it today.
So, Chris, do you think that retailers are going to behave like robots? Do you think people in shops are going to be?
No, not for a long time. No, I think that in retail or in a lot of the other, I would say, customer service areas of the enterprise, if you think about it today, most of the employees that are in those positions are completely untethered from the internet. They have no access to information. They have no access really to their teammates. They can't get expert help. They can't do it. So the opportunity with wearables actually is to connect them for the very first time, because they can't have a smartphone in their hand. They have to get on the network. And if you want to really make them more efficient, tie them together. And so from our perspective, and with us, wearables are not just a standalone device. They're part of a network.
Actually, I think
part of a service, at the end of the day.
Right, I'll riff on that a little bit, which I think is absolutely essential. And one of the things that almost defines the nature of an enterprise solution is that a single app for a single device isn't very valuable to a company. But 10,000 devices all connected to a single system, all connected to all the data that company needs and has is hugely powerful.
Absolutely.
So you talk about 10,000 devices, and we know that any company that's rolling out a deployment of 10,000 or more isn't going to move particularly fast, and it's probably going to go through lots of iterations of cycles. It's going to want to know how long it's going to last in the field. I mean, goodness, a lot of enterprises are still using BlackBerries, issuing corporate BlackBerries. Hands up if still being given a corporate Black. You're probably not the right audience, but if you're in the enterprise, you've probably still got one. So do you think that BYOD, this great bring your own device, is going to sneak in with wearables while enterprises are still thinking about it and people are going to buy their own and bring their own in?
I'll take that. I'd say for glasses, not soon. The answer would be no. I don't envision that. I imagine consumers will use these devices to have them for their own purposes, but I envision for the next 2-3 years, glasses in the enterprise being predominantly issued and provided by the enterprises for those workers.
I would also say that, if you think about the applications and the productivity gains that you can truly impact on the enterprise, the payback actually is quite, we've seen the payback to be quite strong, and they move really fast once they see it, and they can do it on a large scale versus on, if you're not trying to bring something that's about fashion or trends or this, it's just about real dollars. And in this particular case, there's not a threat, if you will, from a smartphone, because you're doing something specific to a particular application, then they can move pretty fast.
Okay, Cary.
So I would think that, with enterprise, and I'm speaking of knowledge worker systems, so unified communication systems like Link or Cisco Jabber or things like that, they all have a very strong mobile footprint in applications. I think consumer wearable devices, headsets, bracelets, anklets, whatever, could actually, if they had the ability to plug into those applications, they could deliver a better experience for people who are trying to communicate and collaborate with each other. For instance, knowing if somebody is wearing the device could be an indicator of presence. Am I available to communicate or not? So being able to feed in and augment the mobile applications, I think, is one area where we can see wearable technology having an impact on the enterprise from the consumer side moving in.
And it's time to see if there's any questions out there from the floor. You've been all very quiet and neat. Anybody? There's a lady in the middle who would like to ask a question.
You're all talking about those as separate silos. What I'm wondering is, at what point do they all come together, and the earpiece and the glasses and the wearables on the body are all one functioning unit to enhance human capacity so you have clear across the board?
So just to repeat, in case everyone couldn't hear, the question was about silos between ear, belt, glass. When's it all going to come together to become one contiguous system? So Cary, you want to start?
Oh, well, I'll take a crack at it. I think some of the fundamental pieces of that puzzle are in place. I think we've got cloud compute capabilities and massive amounts of storage, so we can offload, data and processing to the cloud. I think that is a key element of it. The other piece is going to be having, choosing the hub. I think the mobile device today is the hub. I think in the future, to actually achieve the efficiencies that I think you were speaking to, is the devices need to talk to each other. We need to have some sort of standardization around machine-to-machine communications. So if my wearable on my head is talking to the wearable on my wrist, they can do that and they can be smart together, but together they can be part of a bigger solution that can integrate into a much broader experience that wraps around me. So.
Yeah, I think you can do it today. I don't think that it is something that's off in the future. I think it's probably hard to do today just because of the state of the technologies, but there's nothing that needs to be invented to create the scenario that you just suggested. All of these things exist and they all will be used, and people will say, hey, I want to put these workers with glasses for this scenario. Some, they'll have some audio systems, some wearable sensors and systems. So I think that they'll put them together depending upon what they're trying to achieve. But you can do that certainly today.
Okay, and Chris, do you think we need glass as well as body stuff?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think, as Cary had mentioned, the device, the handheld device will end up being the hub that is the intersection point amongst a lot of different applications and so forth. And so, yeah, I think it's just going to be an extension of what's there today.
Okay, lady in the front here.
Yeah, this alluded to the conversation that we just had in the last session as well, which is, again, Google now, the Internet of Things, the age of context emerging, and the ability of all of your devices to communicate with each other. Again, I want to go back to the same question, pose the same question to you. Where do you see Google with Google's connectivity between their watch to the phone? If you compare the watch to the phone, to the glass, to the phone, to their ubiquitous offerings on the web. How do you see your ecosystem, the ecosystem emerging in that scenario?
So just for the audience, the lady asked about the IoT, and I'll paraphrase you very quickly. And in the age of context, where all devices are communicating with each other, where would you see Google in terms of its role in the ecosystem, and how would other devices merge into that? And that goes in very well. I was also going to ask about standards, so maybe we can talk about that as well. So,
Sure.
Cary?
I'll take a crack at it.
You ready?
So I think it would be phenomenal to have access into the Google Cloud. So if we could plug, not only the glass that you're wearing right there into the Google's Cloud, but my Nike Fuel Band and my Fitbit and all of these things, being able to harness the power of the Google Cloud. But Google would also receive a benefit for that, which is they would receive all the contextual information about me into their cloud. So they could offer me even more personalized ad experiences and whatever else they wanted to sell to me or to advertisers. I think it would all feed in, and it's kind of it would be almost a symbiotic relationship between the device vendors and the Google Cloud. That's what I'd like to see.
Okay. You,
Yes,
Chris?
Yeah.
The question
Well, I
was,
mean, at least from my perspective, I think that, on the consumer side, wearables are a device. On the enterprise, it's a system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And you're not going to sell wearables to enterprise unless you sell the end-to-end system. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because you can sell a display and somebody else can go get the software and somebody else could go do all this, but that's when it takes a lot of time and so forth. If you provide an end-to-end service that has real tangible results, and I think somebody said, you force the employee to utilize it, right? It's part of the uniform. Then I think they're less concerned about, connecting the other devices that person might bring down their body, right? I think that's more of a consumer phenomenon, at least the way we think about it. Because you have to have an end-to-end scenario.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the gentleman here in the front wants to ask a question.
This is a big thing to swallow, right? But one of the projects that I've had a little bit of touch point with was NASCAR and how they build their racetracks usually outside of town. And for them, that's in the age of what we're doing now with technology. same problem with us having to really beef up our bandwidth to have that instant help and back and forth?
Okay, so this is the classic connectivity question, and I sympathize with you living in the middle of nowhere where I get dial-up speeds. So do we think that enterprises are going to have to build in greater connectivity in order to be able to use all this information they're gathering and using?
Yeah, I'll take that. I think the answer to that is yes. I think that is the case. But I'll also caveat it that says it depends really upon the application itself. If you're not sharing video particularly, and it's just messages kind of floating around, then existing infrastructures are usually more than capable of handling that, assuming you have just Wi-Fi. I think when you're looking at scenarios where you're remote and you're tethered to a phone, or scenarios where you actually have a lot of video and you're all in a concentrated place, then bandwidth does become, in fact, one of the primary kind of limiting factors on what you can actually do. But I'll even throw one out. There's a bigger limiting factor, which is power, battery life, which is these are devices that are power hungry. Anyone wearing Google Glass knows that. But other devices as well, which is these things are not only mobile and need kind of connectivity, but they're also wearable and need power. And so that's the things that we look forward to the manufacturers kind of increasingly solve is longer battery life. And that's why we have to look for scenarios where you can swap devices out. Because if you're working 8 hours a day, you can't rely on a single device and then have it stop and charge. So there's ways around all of these problems, but those would be the two that are the top of mind for me.
Just returning for a second to we touched on privacy briefly and then we moved away. I'd like to just go back to that if we could. I've heard of situations where new hires have been asked by recruiters to hand over their Facebook credentials so that you can hide your pictures of you doing things you perhaps would regret from the outside world, but you can't hide it from your friends or whatever. And so you're asked to hand over your password so that they can really have a look at your profile, see what you're really like. So if I'm bristling with all these wearables, I've got some glasses on, I've got a wristband, I've got various monitors, and I'm having a bad day, okay? Got a headache or whatever, and I'm not so fast that day. Is my boss going to see my performance stats? And I'm going to ask this to Chris, because it's in a retail environment, sell, sell, sell. I'm having a bad day, I'm not selling. What's happening to me?
There's a huge opportunity. I mean, if you look at it from the company's perspective.
That's what I'm scared of.
Today, when you go to work for a company, you agree to allow that company most of the time to read your emails, to listen to your conversations, to do a lot of other things. So, that's the nature of the job, right? But there's a tremendous opportunity from a productivity standpoint on the analytics and the big data aspects of the amount of information that we can collect relative to the enterprise.
Yes, there is. And yesterday at the FAST conference, which was a sister conference, there's some of you were there, we heard from the US soccer coach talking about how she gets stats from the women's team from the moment they're awake when they're in camp all the way through. And she can tell if someone's tired, if someone needs more training, or if someone's unfit, even if they claim the otherwise. And so is this going to become Big Brother?
Well, yeah, sure.
I think there's always the opportunity.
And do we care about this?
But most of the things, at least the way we're approaching it, is less about the individuals and it's more about the broader good. So we can track all the way down to individual performance, but we tend to look at a team level first.
And companies will do that anyway, regardless of wearables. That isn't a wearables question per se. That's just a company and technology question more broadly. But I think the wearables create new data sources, new things that you can learn about, but that can also be used for the power of good to make things better, cheaper, faster, safer. So just because you can do it doesn't mean that people will or should. But that's always something that everyone would kind of have to think about in their day-to-day work.
So how far are we away from me sending in my resume for a job and not only including references and past employment history, but a USB drive with some of my performance stats on it? Is that going to happen?
Could be, yeah. I mean, it could also, maybe for contact center agents, it's like, your pulse rate elevates quite a bit when you're on a phone call. Why is
Exactly.
that? It becomes maybe your your bio resume or something that you pass along and say, look, I can handle this situation.
Do you think this is going to become an issue in acceptance of wearables? I mean, right now, everyone's kind of excited about wearable technology, especially in the consumer space. But do you think once people realize what enterprises can gather from you, that people might start to become a bit more resistant to it?
I think if you build in the right tools around the devices, I don't think it has to be, right? You can geofence devices so that they automatically turn off in a particular area. And if you give the users some amount of control, appropriate control, then they feel empowered, or at least they know what's going on. I think when they don't have those kinds of tools, that's when you might feel anxious. But I think those tools and those ability for users to manage the devices within some normal boundaries, I think will be there.
Okay, and then let's flip it over, and there must be an enormous uptick to it as well. So can you tell us about some of the real huge benefits, the trickle-down benefits that consumers are going to get from enterprise technology with wearables? Chris?
Well, I think that one of the points that was made earlier is probably the most impactful, at least in the sectors that we're focused on, which is the ability to connect people together on the same team selling, team working, team engagement, doing things together is far more productive, and I think that's a big opportunity with wearables that for those enterprise workers today that are, as I said before, they're untethered, they have nothing. So if you connect them, because they're on the move, and we're mainly describing, the non-professional mobile employees, or people that are not behind a desk. Anybody behind a desk, they tend, they're going to have a screen, I think, as you said, or they're going to have a smartphone, or they're going to have a tablet. They're going to have all of that aspect. But all the other ones that are running around here in this hotel, they actually have nothing, and the ability to communicate or interact and so forth is a huge, huge benefit. And wearables can address a lot of that while they continue to do their job.
One of the trends I've noticed in retail is that everybody has an earpiece. Everyone's got a radio hanging around their neck these days. I'm not sure if they're talking to me or their employee or listening to the radio or whatever. Do you think we're going to see this technology disappearing more into the background with the new generation of wearable technology? Because at the moment, it's quite in my face.
I would think so. I think, I think the biggest bottleneck in that entire thing is battery life, as we have all mentioned before, is once we start to see improvements in, density and actually more optimized algorithms in the chips, I think we're going to see more longer life, which will lead to smaller devices because you make a smaller battery. I also think, with having audio pieces in retail environments, you're going to see, especially with wearables in the consumers, when they come into the Gap or whatever, if they give consent for their device or devices that they're wearing to announce that they've arrived at the store, you're going to see improved customer service levels. They're going to know, it's going to be scary, maybe a little bit, but they'll know they'll know your buying patterns, and they'll be able to customize and tailor services to you as you're going into establishments, just based on the tech that's on your body.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies out there that are actually, you see it in retail, that are I'll say they sniff the identity of the person they walk in. It's usually off the cell phone, not a wearable. They'll pick it up and so forth. But the real question is, how do you serve that person better, right? Yep. If the other person on the other side of the equation, on the customer service side, is not connected, they can't respond, right? So they have to have that ability to do something with that information.
Exactly. So
that's back to the big data discussion, isn't it? You're collecting all this data, but are you farming it effectively? So.
Well, yeah, and does the point of sale system become the hub in a retail environment? So every associate that's out there has got an earpiece in, and as soon as somebody comes through the door that is a high potential customer, they get notified, and maybe they even got the name whispered into their ear, so they can walk up to that person and tailor their service to that person. So.
Yeah. Well, apart from the fact that when I get a call and someone calls me by my first name, they're probably trying to sell me something usually. But I quite like the personal service in the store when they're actually able to look up my purchasing record. So do you think that the ability to have wearable technology is going to give, say, Ralph Lauren an advantage over Tommy Hilfiger in terms of the war for talent and the war for staff?
Yeah, it could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, because it really comes down to, if one retailer is their associates are connected and the other isn't, how much can you really do with the ones that are unconnected? You really can't. You can do training before the store, and that's so old school. You know, the one that has it, whether it's in the moment, real time action, whether it's somebody is a big customer or, you know, product technology or product information that the customer needs at that time, readily available and so forth, it's going to make a huge difference.
That's true in almost any job. I mean, if you're, you know, you're doing similar jobs to your competition and your people are better at it, that's an advantage. And anyone who can do that and see that will take advantage of it, absolutely.
And so if I then want to change sites and take my data with me, do you think data liberation is going to become an issue? Do you think I'm going to be allowed to take my, how many steps I've walked on the shop floor in the last 2 years? Does that information belong to me? Do I have a right to have it?
I think you might see it. I think you might know it. In that regards, you might have visibility to it, again, for the first time, right? You don't know today, and you might get feedback and that you just weren't able to see before.
I was thinking about call centers where, you know, people have judged on how many, you know, what's the average duration of a call, how quickly do they answer it, you know, do they get tied up with long conversations with people? So will the same apply to, say, retail or to customer service environments?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I think, you know, I'll just play advocate here. Yeah, I would think so. A sales associate that's out there trying to sell you something, if they're selling more, I mean, you can, and the conversation, you could probably do some sort of metrics around length of discussion versus actual selling, you know, how much money that they've made. So you could optimize certain people for certain customer types. I think over time you can categorize that. So it's interesting.
Okay. So we've got about 15 minutes to go, so, and thank you. We're going to take some questions from the floor. So, lady in the middle in white.
I have a question about security.
Security question.
Because we all know how easy it is to hack and implant viruses in computers. Who's developing the security software that protects us? Is it all proprietary? Will it all go together? Or is it just kind of like, not something to talk about yet?
So just to make sure everyone heard, the lady asked about security and hacking and who's producing the software that's going to be protecting us all from anyone sniffing this data that shouldn't be.
I'll start that the conversation, which is most of the enterprise scenarios, at least that we work in, is that these applications and devices are contained within the company's network environment. It's their infrastructure, as if it was any other device, PC application. So in that sense, the people who are building the safeguards for the company's data and devices today will continue to do that, knowing there's other kinds of devices kind of out there. So that would be my first most simplistic answer, which is the same people who are building the safeguards today are the ones who will be building it for wearables in the enterprise tomorrow.
Absolutely. I mean, a good example. In our case, we work over the Wi-Fi network within retailers. You may not know this, but I mean, you know, in a retailer, they might have a public Wi-Fi that you can access when you walk into the store, but they also have the corporate Wi-Fi network that you don't even see because they don't broadcast their SSIDs. They don't even let you don't even know it's there. And we run on that private, secure, very secure network, especially if they're doing e-commerce over that network. It has to all be encrypted and so forth. And so we're not on the public side of it.
Yeah, and I would say from the device side, if we look at like Bluetooth Low Energy in particular, I mean, if there are security mechanisms that are being built into the specification, they're already in existence today, encrypted channels and whatnot, but it is becoming more secure in like the 4.0 versions with secure profiles and stuff. So I think the transmissions are going to be encrypted between your devices, depending on the radios that you use. If you use something like NFC, maybe not the greatest thing to transmit data. But if you're using something that's encrypted, I mean, you're going to have to build that into an enterprise device anyways. But you know, the standards are there for at least Bluetooth.
Okay. Any more questions from out there? Oh, yes, over at the back.
Do you see the consumer wearables migrating into the enterprise as we've seen with handhelds and tablet devices? IT departments hated the iPad. They have to keep them more and more. So while it's interesting to develop industry-specific responses to wearability in the enterprise, will we see it really coming again from the consumer side into the enterprise and driving?
So the question was...
I would say that, you're going to repeat the question?
I was going to repeat the question just in case everyone didn't catch it. It was about how consumer devices would penetrate into the enterprise.
Yes, I would say is that I believe today that wearable technology in enterprise will be driven first by enterprise, largely because these are going to be single purpose or single solution devices and scenarios, right? It's going to be for a nurse or for a warehouse picker or an oil rig worker. So the applications and the solutions are going to be fairly narrowly defined for a task or a job role. When we see these devices becoming more general purpose, predominantly for information workers, people like us, that you can use for a variety of things, that's when people will bring them in to work, and you'll start seeing the same phenomenon of bring your own device and IT acceptance of these are devices that people now use for a variety of tasks, for scheduling, for communications, for collaboration, for content access, kind of on the move. But I think that's the next step, certainly in the enterprise. The first would be single purpose or limited purpose kind of solutions, devices driven by IT, giving it to their employees versus the other way around today.
Okay, and that brings me on to another question, which is about there's a research company called Gartner that I'm sure many of you know of, and Gartner has a very famous hype cycle. So I think I could plot my life on the hype cycle. It starts off with the peak of inflated expectations, it drops down into the trough of disillusionment, and then it starts to climb the slope of enlightenment. So it's great stuff, and you can really map anything, dinner date or your holiday against that. So where would you say that wearables are in the enterprise on the hype cycle against wearables in consumer? You're all welcome to have your view on this. I don't want you all in the same place.
I think it just depends. I mean, if it's wearables like on an oil rig, it may be well past the hype cycle, where it's just common practice. If it's devices that are small and discrete that you're wearing that allow you to perform your job better because that it gets you into meetings quicker, or it does allows you to log into your computer just by walking up to it, or those types of things. I think that's still pre-hype. I don't even think we've gotten there yet. I think the hype cycle is on the consumer side, and the enterprise will follow.
I think it's all consumer, and on the enterprise side, it's very early, and it's hard to find a lot, and it's going to be fairly niche, and it's going to be a lot more pragmatic, I would tend to say, because so it kind of honestly it helps the consumer hype helps on the enterprise side. I mean, but as I tell people, we were doing wearables before wearables were cool. Right? I mean, you were too. You guys, they all did wearables. But now it's so it definitely helps bring some understanding to it and some adoption to it by the end customers.
Right. Yeah, I'd agree, and I'd say, like my panelists here, I think we're early on in the hype cycle for enterprise, but I'd also think that the amplitude of that graph will be lower than in the consumer, where you can imagine so many things in the consumer context, and it's so cool, and there's so many scenarios, and that people just love it, and there's a lot of press and PR, rightly so, which is great. And in the enterprise, it's going to be ROI driven, very pragmatic, so you'll go through the curve, which much lower highs and much higher lows.
Because honestly, if you look at it, the way we tend to think of it is you look at the penetration that enterprise apps have got on handheld devices and so forth, right? I mean, most people have devices, they have smartphones, but does the enterprise have their apps out there yet, right? Well, we're going to trail or follow in that same footprint. They're going to be fairly cautious from the standpoint of some of the issues related to that, but I think also we could help accelerate enterprise adoption of applications because we can literally use the smartphone or the tablet as the hub and do a specialized kind of requirement or function, if you will, on a particular wearable, and it kind of go hand in hand.
One of the areas that we touched on with one of the questions but haven't really dived into is the IoT, the Internet of Things, machine-to-machine communication. I think there's probably a bigger potential in enterprise wearables than there is in consumer wearables. And so I'd like to use the last 10 minutes or so of this panel just to go over some of the ways in which you think that the IoT is going to play out here. I'm talking about an employee reads a barcode, in a picker or something like that, which then triggers a sequence of events. But they don't actually have to use any manual input. There's no emails going around. So who would like to start on this?
Oh, well, I think this is a great and actually an important kind of part of the conversation regarding wearables. And in many ways, I combine those two big concepts of Internet of Things and wearables often together. In some ways, wearable devices are just a sensor, a powerful one, albeit. But that's what the Internet of Things largely are about, is about sensors and equipment and devices all networked up. And now people are part of that system too. Yes. So you're being able to read it and get information about where people are, what their context, orientation, bearing is, what's going on, what are they seeing right now, as well as people wearing these devices can get information about the environment around them. What are the sensors that are firing off alerts and getting information from the environment where, if they don't have a wearable device, that's all invisible. So they don't have access to it and the environment doesn't have access to them. So I put these two concepts basically squarely together. And that's most of the solutions that we would find in an enterprise would combine these topics in a very kind of real way today.
Do you think you can give me an example of an IoT app with a piece of wearable technology in the enterprise?
Yes, sure. I'll give you an example. So using smart glasses in the hospital, I can get information from a monitor that is beaming continuously information about what's going on in the next room to a nurse. The nurse can look at it hands-free, activate that device and interrogate it, get more waveform information. She can turn it on or off, for example. And so all of that is being kind of part of just the fabric of the data, the connections, the sensors, and the devices. So that would be one way of using hands-free device access and control.
Okay. And I would just build onto that system. So I would take little Bluetooth smart beacons and start putting them all around. And as doctors and nurses are walking through this hospital environment, they're firing off. So you can actually not only have all the information you need here, but you can also find people at that point in time when you need them. And I think to do that, it's gonna require a couple of things. Some sort of indoor navigation system, some sort of, I would say, a massive amount of data storage in the hospital infrastructure to store all this data, but also things about the wearer, their expertise, their specialties. I'll put that piece into the system.
Okay, Chris, you going to build on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, in our particular space, I think the whole concept of machine interfacing and so forth can make the enterprise side so much more productive. I'll give you a good example. We tend to categorize it in two different things. You can have alerts and you can have queries. Okay, I'm either getting information or I'm asking for retrieving information, right? In our particular space, you're in a retail store and the back door opens and an alarm goes off. What happens today? Well, it might go off the loudspeaker and bothers everybody. It might send the guy an email, might send him a text message, might send the manager something. Well, why not play it directly in his ear? The machine will talk directly to the person so they can take immediate action, because if you put it on a smart device, or a tablet, that's not actionable. It's in the pocket. Somebody has to open it up and look at it. So we tend to go that last 18 inches from here to here.
I've heard of the last mile, but
what's the last mile? No, we are definitely all about the last 18
fantastic.
inches, right? Get it to the actionable thing. And so that would be an alert. The same thing, I might want to make a query, right? I want to query the financial system. I want to query the inventory system. I want to query the payroll system or the workforce system of who's here and so forth. All of those things are all possible because you're now connected. And you're connected while you're doing your job. You don't have to stop to put the tablet in front of you to look at something to find it out.
So in real-time decision-making, yesterday again we heard about SAP HANA, which is in-memory technology. So, real-time decision-making, basing your actionable analytics or basing actions upon analytics, do you think that's going to give companies the competitive advantage and make them start to want to adopt wearable technology in the enterprise?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. And do you think that in doing so, do you think we're going to be waking up any sleeping giants? I'm thinking about how Microsoft has reacted to Google coming into the enterprise space with things like the Screwgled campaign. Do you think there's any companies out there that we should be selling our stock in? Or buying?
Yeah. So that's a hard one to answer, actually. I would say is that,
I'm not going to say.
I mean,
Any old school companies out there that you think might have, thrashing their
few.
last breaths?
well, I wouldn't say that they're crashing their last breaths, but all of the companies that exist out there have systems and devices of some sort, and wearables allow you to extend those to new scenarios and new workers. So I'd say it's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for the established enterprise software companies to say, now I can take the power of all of my ERP data or my CRM data or whatever it is and apply it to new people and new scenarios and new ways. And I think that's exciting for them. I think they're looking forward to wearable technologies broadly as a way to reinvigorate some of the investment in IT in the enterprise.
I would say we touched on it a little bit earlier, the infrastructure piece. I think if I were a networking company, I would be very interested in this, perhaps. I mean, more data, bigger pipes. That's so if there are sleeping dinosaurs in that area, that's where I would go looking.
And bigger batteries.
But I also think that wearables are going to help fuel innovation with new startups and a lot of new ideas and so forth that the whole application development for smartphones and tablets is kind of mature. It's played out. The first movers got a lot of the domain caught and they're holding on to it. And Wearable changes that because you can actually take the app out of the phone and actually do something fundamentally different with it and make it far more efficient than it was in the phone. And that can change the equation. That can change who was winning and losing.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good stuff. So do we have time for one or two more questions from the floor? Okay, Tony, you may ask a question.
Actually, it's a question for all three of you, from your own perspective. And it sort of relates to your other question about the hype curve and stuff. So we have up here two startups, and Plantronics is what, 50 years old?
52 years old, yes.
Part of the problem, I think, is how do you get the enterprise to understand that wearable tech is something they need to pay attention to? So you've got, a long 52-year-old history on your side. It'd be interesting to hear how Plantronics and PLT Labs is going about it. Then I'm also interested to hear how, from your startup perspective, marketing is going to be key as you transition from technology to a real business. So I'm interested in understanding how, all three of you are planning to attack this and really help to lower the hype curve to the catastrophic solution into, at the far right where everyone's happy and maybe you guys see exits through some of these companies that may otherwise, lag behind or
All right, so I guess being the oldest, I'll go first.
I like that.
So I see it a couple of ways. I mean, Plantronics has been very successful today in the enterprise contact centers, and I think the strategy that we've approached is a twofold: building really small but very powerful, very smart sensing devices. And then building the software development toolkits to allow developers to actually take those devices and integrate them into line of business applications, unified communication systems. So being able to have devices that are appealing to the employee, but also having the programmatic interfaces to actually allow device access and manipulation, not only for the individual, but also from like a centrally managed perspective. So the IT administrator can administer an entire network of wearable tech. So my strategy is to look at how we can integrate into those enterprise solutions that are out there today.
Okay.
So there you go.
Okay, Chris, how are you going to convince the enterprise to work with Agile?
Well, one of the things that we did, Tony, that's actually a little bit different is so with our wearable, we don't sell these. We don't sell this. We're a SaaS company. You get this for free. Right? You subscribe to our software. The software is what makes the productivity. The wearable is actually just the form factor that it's delivered on. And so we're a SaaS company, and therefore we go in and provide these as part of the service. Try it, see if you like it. All comes from the cloud, and so forth. So we definitely are not going back. If you try to enter wearables, in my opinion, and do it the old-fashioned way of hardware distribution and so forth, there's a lot of barriers from very well-established companies, right? But if you go a different way, which is most of the software companies today are all SaaS model, that's harder for the typical hardware-based companies to respond and react because they cannot erode their legacy business by start giving away hardware.
Okay. And Ed, you get the last word on this.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll say there's really kind of two answers to your question. The first is how do we get interest in the first order from the enterprise about the stuff that we're doing? And one of the things I could say is we thank Google for that, to be honest, is, back in 2010, when we were having elevator pitches and discussions, it was, imagine a world of information right in your field of view, and, you sound like a crazy man. But now you can just say, have you heard of Google Glass? 100% of the time, people have. So people are familiar now with that type of device, and it's made our life easier. And in fact, every company that we've worked with has started playing around with glass and other similar devices. So the opportunity is already kind of there thanks to the category becoming more mature. And the way that we actually have our first conversations, and we're quite successful, is a demo. We show someone a demo, and everyone is hooked because it's amazing. And then the scenarios that you can imagine then just kind of go from there. So we found it to be actually quite easy to get interest and excitement in the enterprise. But going forward, our approach is going to be very similar to, as we were talking about before, is a SaaS model, but really a software-driven business, which means that we have partners. And we have partners in some of the biggest software companies in the world are our partners, as well as the biggest systems integrators in the world who are already in the enterprise, already doing stuff. This just gives them more fuel to do cooler and more stuff. So that's our job, is to get excitement across the entire ecosystem of the enterprise software space.
Thank you. So for wearable technology in the enterprise, the future's bright. I'd like to thank Ed English from APX Labs, Chris Todd from Theatro, and Cary Bran from Plantronics. Thank you very much.